Dalmore. I love the Dalmore. Excited for this one. Dalmore is it's going to be a Highland whiskey, and what's interesting about the Dalmore as well, there's a lot of things that are interesting about the Dalmore, but a lot of people have kind of a problem with the Dalmore because it's one of those whiskies that is known to have the E150 food colouring product in it. Now, I think Dalmore gets a little bit unfairly slated for this because there are more distilleries than you'd like to believe that have that food colouring in them. I don't know why they do it. They probably don't need to do it. But when you look at the actual colour of the Dalmore, it is beautiful. This is what we're going to do today, the 12, Dalmore 12, Sherry Cask Select, and it is absolutely stunning. It's a really gorgeous whiskey, as you see. And what's cool about Dalmore, especially, I think, is their branding. I mean, just look at the shape of the bottle, number one. It's such a classy looking bottle. It makes it look like I really know what I'm talking about. And you got this cool little 12, the 12 prong, I think it's a 12. How many prongs on it? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 12 prong or 12 something stag. It's got 12 antlers, 12 points, 12-point antler stag. There's a whole story about that we'll talk about some other time. But basically, this is a whiskey that reminds me of Christmas. It's just got all these amazing scents and stuff like that. So it's a real beauty. But some people get fed up with the colour or a bit annoyed about it. And I think that's kind of a moot point, to be honest with you. The colour of the whiskey is not nearly as important as the taste and the flavour. Now, my method is to clean the glass with the whiskey. And basically all of my whiskey tasting and whiskey appreciation method comes from the one and only Mr. Richard Paterson, who is the main man at Dalmore. And so this is kind of homage to him. First thing I like to do is just pour just a slight amount in, and we're going to clean the glass. That's actually more than I'd like to do, so I'll try and do less next time. But basically the point of that, if you've never done this before, is to try and get the whiskey to coat every part of the inside of the glass. And there's methods in the madness here, and I'm just going to pour a bit more. And you want it to coat every part of the inside. Now, why would you do that? Why would you waste whiskey, especially when you're paying for this bottle? I want to say it's about $80, $85, maybe $90 US. So whatever that translates to in your part of the world, whiskey's not a cheap. Scotch is not a cheap pastime to have, but it is a glorious one. Why would you clean the glass? You clean the glass really to get rid of any kind of interference in the palate. So you would maybe like dishwasher tablet smell, or any kind of soap residue, or even if you've had a whiskey and it didn't clean very well last time, if you hand cleaned it. So you just want to clean the glass with a very, very small amount of whiskey, and trust me, your nose, your palate, and the whole experience, you're going to thank me for it. And again, if you are spending that much money on a bottle of whiskey, why would you not want to waste just a tiny little bit in order to get the full pleasure from the bottle, right? Makes sense? Makes sense to me. So here we go. The Dalmore 12. So, colour. Look at that. Look at that. I don't even care if there's food colouring in it. It's just glorious. It's just gorgeous to look at. Look at that. It's like a kind of a copper. I mean, it's obviously got Sherry Cask influence. I believe with the Dalmore, you've got 10 years in the regular white oak cask, and then you get 2 years in the Sherry Cask. So it's a sherry finish and a cask select. So these are selected, specially selected sherry casks. So these are, so good, man. Oh, so good. Excuse me. I mean, you've got a citrus, but it's more like a kind of a caramelized. It's like a candy orange kind of a thing on top. Little ginger. I mean, you get the sherry. The sherry's there for sure. It's kind of up front. Cinnamon. and you get that lovely kind of warming honey, similar to the Balvenie. You know, when you have a Balvenie, you just get a lot of honey and lemon. I don't really get the lemon in this one; it's not there, but that kind of honey. Oh, it's so good, man! It smells like Christmas. It smells like Christmas. So if you're watching this in July, it's gonna be weird. Although it also kind of smells like the end of a warm summer night. You can just kind of hang out, in the backyard. Anyway, 12 seconds because it's 12 years in a barrel and we want to appreciate every one of those years. So 12 seconds on the palate. I mean, you can't not appreciate that bottle. It's just, oh, on the tongue, you've got kind of dark chocolate. The honey's coming back in. I mean, it's just such a, excuse me, it's just such a good, it's such a good freaking whiskey. It's what it is. It's delicious. And it depends as well, like what you ate. Now, I had meatballs tonight, just so you know. And I think when you have something that's got that kind of extra savory, kind of umami type thing, and that's lingering in the back of your palate, it allows like the kind of natural sweeter flavors just to kind of roll over and have more effect on your tongue. Like I can imagine if I can, yeah, I can imagine if you'd eaten some like pesto or like uh, something really garlicky or whatever, this wouldn't necessarily have the same effect. But when you've kind of got that nice sort of meaty, kind of neutral flavor, anyway, it's just such a good whiskey. Oh, so good. The Dalmore, the Dalmore 12 Sherry Cask Select. I was thinking about this one, thinking about David and why I like to think about King David. I like to think about King David mostly because I would say, in terms of all the biblical characters, and this is going to sound a bit weird because number one, I'm not a king, I'm not royalty in any way, shape, or form. Um, I'm not even king in my own house. One of the dogs is the king. But I do think that there's something about David and all his flaws and yet all his victories that are so relatable, especially for men. How can you look at David and be anything than utterly just impressed by the way that he has favor with God, And even when he's going through it, even when he has those moments where everything's just going wrong for him, he just still comes back. And when we know that the very phrase, like David was a man after God's own heart, like it's just so amazing to think like that. I mean, you think about all the stuff he did that wasn't good. I once knew somebody who their wife really disliked David because, kind of a modern reading of David's story, but essentially looking at David as somebody who was adulterous and had an affair and all that stuff. And so just, out of their own experience and stuff that happened to them, just couldn't look at David favorably. And I think that's in some way that's kind of a fair response to David, but um, I think the benefit of looking at David is that we just get to look at him and go, no way, like for all that he did, he just kept on coming back to a place of repentance. He kept on coming back to a place where he just wanted to be obedient to God and put God first and do what God was showing him to do. And he did that time and time again. I love Psalm 27. Um, I love the Psalms anyway, probably songwriter thing, but I love Psalm 27. One thing I've asked of the Lord that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. And I love that last part, particularly to inquire in his temple. The thought of meeting God in that place of God's temple and inquiring of him, asking him questions. I think we really need to get to a place in our prayer lives where we are asking God. How many times does Jesus say ask? And yet I think in our kind of Western, our civilization, which is in some ways has kind of ruined us as men, we kind of think about asking as something that, yeah, it's a little bit like, well, if I ask, I'll look a bit weak, or if I ask, it's impolite. Maybe you're brought up in that kind of tradition, or if you ask, it's a little bit impudent. But you think about the culture of the near Middle East, where David would have been situated, where Jesus would have been situated, and asking is something that's a far more aggressive event. I don't know if you've ever been to anywhere in the Middle East. I remember going to Turkey, actually just for a day. We went to this bazaar in Turkey where guys were selling knockoff Armani jeans, and like everything was just totally fake. But you went in, and I wanted to get a pair of fake Armani jeans, and I remember being there, and this guy in the bazaar just would not let me leave until I bought something. And it was that kind of, I wouldn't say it was intimidating, but it was insistent to the point where you just felt like you had nowhere to go until you bought something. And that's what I think asking would have looked like in the kind of Davidic time and in the time of Jesus, when and in that area where people were just asking almost belligerently, unapologetically, just asking. And David talks about that. He's like, I'm going to inquire. I want to spend, I want to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. I want to be in the temple of the Lord all the days of my life. And I'm going to inquire in the temple of the Lord. He's asking God's advice on every move that he's making, on every situation he's a part of. And as a king, he's going to be part of a lot of situations. And how many less situations are you and I going to be part of? And yet, we're still invited into that relationship with God just to ask him, That's so good, man. These are things I like to think about. Yeah, to inquire of the Lord. I think that I think it's important for us to take that time. I think that's what being a man after God's own heart is. It doesn't matter what you've done. If you're repentant, your heart is truly repentant. If you're Psalm 51 repentant, and you come back and you actually make that repentant 180 and get back on track with God, and then you're looking at God for all of his goodness, which he's promised to you, you have to inquire of him. You have to come back and ask. You have to Psalm 27 it and come back and go, right, God, I want to be in your temple. I've had some time out of it, but one day in your temple is better than 1,000 elsewhere. That's why David was a man after God's own heart. And there's so much more to David's story. It's just a thought I was having. I'm not a theologian, not a historian, not a pastor. I just love the Word of God, and I love David. I love the story of David, start to finish. I love how he's selected from, he's 13th of 13 brothers, and God still selects him. I just love it, start all the way to the end. What a guy. Anyway, that's David. This is the Dalmore 12. Once again, this is the 12 Sherry Cask Select. I want to say about $80 to like $90 US in most stores. Probably a horrendous amount more in Canada. I've got some Canadian whiskey loving friends who tell me how horrendous the Canadian tax is. It's not much better in Scotland from what I hear right now. For some reason, the Scottish government want to, or it might be Westminster, I'm not sure, but they want to impose some kind of super tax on whiskey, which is so stupid. Oh, the notes on it, man, it's just so good. That finish, as it lingers in the tongue, we'll go again. Mm. It's like a creme brulee almost, like a panna cotta. Have you ever had a panna cotta? I had this panna cotta one time in Denver. Amazing. And I think as it goes on, you get a little bit more of that citrus, almost like lemon in there just towards the end. Not a lot, not like the Balvenie what I talked about. It's got that front forward kind of honey and lemon, but more just kind of in the background. Could be lemon, could just be orange. It's kind of creamy orange. Oh, it's so good, so good. Anyway, God bless you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Dalmore 12. Slanjava.